And we're live. Thanks for coming back, guys. I want today's video to be about equity on a vehicle lease. So I didn't even know, honestly, this how this worked, and I didn't even know this was a thing. But for the first time, after leasing three vehicles, I turned in a lease and I received a check for $2,000 net. So that means after the car was turned in and whatever costs were taken from there or whatever the case, they issued me a check for $2,000 in equity. And so I want to explain how this works. Not as an investment per se or anything like that, but just so that you're aware, because I think this is really important. I think that a lot of people, when it comes to the leasing or car purchasing, um, a lot of people get taken advantage, unfortunately. And so this was the third vehicle that I leased. I leased them all with the same dealership, and all three of them were Volkswagens. Um, I remember my first lease payment, and I'll tell you why I went with a lease, was because I went in and all three vehicles that I leased, I got them with zero down payment. And that was a big thing for me. I prefer to have money in my bank account than giving a down payment on a car. I've never seen as a car as a good investment. I've never seen as a car as a place to put money. I almost made a few mistakes in the past where I did, and I remember I was looking at BMWs and they were asking for $8,000 down payment, and the monthly for that lease, okay, not even a finance, was somewhere around, and this is like 7 years ago. The payment on it was like in the 600s a month. So I was like, no way. And that's not even including insurance. That's not including gas. So going back to how the lease equity payout works, essentially what happened with this lease, I leased this vehicle in January of 2020. And so what happens is in the contract, the leasing contract, there's it's called a closed-ended lease. And so there's a set purchase price at which at the end of the 3 years, which mine was a 3-year lease, you can purchase the car for. And you can either pay it off in cash or you could do a financing after the 3 years are over. So you have the ability to basically keep that car if you wanted to, and the price at which you can purchase it at is set. So what happens is that I got an email from the dealership somewhere about, let's see, I mean, this check was made out in December, on December 5th. So somewhere in November, I got an email from the dealership saying, hey, there's equity in your lease. Come talk to us where we can offer you a payout. So I said, oh, that sounds interesting. I've never had that happen to me, the two previous leases, but because the car market's been so crazy, and car prices, used car prices, everything has gone up so much because of the pandemic and things being closed down and just it being difficult to get a new vehicle, right? So when I met with them, I remember I met in November of 2022, and I remember them telling me at the dealership, we have more customers than cars for the first time. So we don't have cars to sell. So that's why we're offering payouts or cash out basically on your lease. So I started investigating a little bit, and they told me, look, we'll be able to give you somewhere around $2,000 if you were to turn in your lease. You don't have to make any more payments on it. You don't have to pay if there's damage or anything like that to it. You don't have to worry about the miles on the vehicle because you're under what your 3-year lease allows, which for me, mine was a 12,000 miles a year. And so I was under, I believe what the maximum was. And so basically, all said and done, I ended up turning in the vehicle. I have another vehicle, so I was able to just keep that one, and they issued me a check for $2,000. Um, it was really interesting because when I leased the car, I never thought I'd be able to get any equity in that vehicle. See, I always saw leasing a vehicle kind of like renting a house. But in this case, because prices of vehicles have gone up so much, it was in their best interest, the dealership, to take the car from me, give me the $2,000, and resell it, right? And so that's what happened here. They looked at the vehicle, they said it's in good shape, and then they offered me $2,000. And I took it because, again, I have another vehicle and it worked out for me. But I want you guys to be aware that that's even an option. I didn't know it was an option. I had heard that something like that existed in the past, but essentially, if you're in a lease right now and you don't really need that car, you might want to look into that. Now, I remember when I got the offer from the dealership, I thought, well, let me go check around. And so I went to CarMax here in California. I went to CarMax, which is a huge dealership of used cars. And I went to them and I asked them, hey, I'm getting an offer to buy out my lease. Are you guys able to do the same thing? And they made me an offer. They appraised the vehicle and everything through the website. It was really easy. Not affiliated with them in any way, but it was really easy. But what happened was that when they called Volkswagen, which is where I was leasing the car from, the finance company, Volkswagen of America, I believe it was, Volkswagen was marking up the vehicle to sell it to a third party, CarMax, to then sell it to me. So if I would have purchased the car outright, it was something around like $11,000 just to buy it cash. If Volkswagen, the dealership that I was dealing with, were to buy the car, they would get it at the same price as me, around $11,000, and then they can give me the $2,000 of equity, and then they resell it for whatever price. But CarMax, since they were a third party, they didn't have that option. What happened was Volkswagen, the finance company, when CarMax called Volkswagen, the finance company, Volkswagen, the finance company, said, hey, yeah, even though the price is whatever, $11,000 to buy it outright, because you're a third party, we can mark up the price. And so for them, it was like $20,000. So at that point, there's no equity that CarMax could give me. And so because Volkswagen of America, the finance company where I was leasing the vehicle with, was marking up the price, I couldn't turn it into CarMax. It didn't make sense. Now, when I was at CarMax, I met a guy that was really cool, and I was talking to him, and he was sharing with me that he had a Toyota Tacoma TRD, and he had only leased it for about 7 months. And Toyota called him back and said, hey, we'll buy that lease back and we'll give you equity. And he was curious, and so he ended up going to CarMax, and CarMax was able to give him $8,000, an $8,000 check, just to take over the car. So payments end on that lease, and he's left without a car, but he had another vehicle also, and he walked away with $8,000. I thought that was really, really cool because when you lease a vehicle, you're renting that vehicle, right? But if somebody offers you a certain amount to walk away from it, maybe it makes sense to take it. For me, I thought this was really interesting. I thought I'd share it because I had never come across this before. I'd never considered turning in a lease for equity. I've turned in leases early and gotten other ones, and I actually, with Volkswagen, that dealership, I've had 3 leases with them, and I'm really happy with them, and they've been really cool. But one thing to take into account, especially as times are changing, is, what is the monthly payment on the vehicle that you have? What is the insurance on top of that? What is the gas on top of that? Maintenance on top of that? So your expenses are not just what the lease payment is. And that's one thing that I learned when I first leased my first Volkswagen. I remember the payment was around $185 a month, 0 down, which, by the way, let me get into that real quick. You can lease a vehicle with 0 down payment. For some reason, a lot of people want to put money down, and you know, they want a lower monthly payment, I guess. But you can lease a vehicle with zero down. So the way I look at it is like, should I keep that $5,000 or whatever down payment, $10,000? Should I just keep it in my bank account and then pay a little bit more each month, or should I put it as a down payment? And for me, it's always made sense to keep it in my bank account and have a zero down payment. That's what I do when I walk into the dealership and I'm going to get a lease. I tell them, look, I want zero down. I'm not interested in putting a down payment. So what are the plans based on that? Another thing to keep in mind right now is if you had a lease that you took out prior to interest rates going up, right? You potentially, you know, have a locked in payment. And one thing that I also didn't know was that lease payments are determined by the price of the vehicle, but also the interest rate, the current interest rate. So I remember when they offered me the ability to finance the same vehicle that I had right now, instead of getting the $2,000 check that I received, they said, "Hey, do you want to just finance your car and keep it?" And I was like, "Well, what would the payments be?" And they were somewhere around $500 a month. And I was thinking, I'm not interested in that. And the reason it was so high was because at the time, this is beginning of December, end of November of this year, 2020. I'm sorry, of 2022. The interest rate was already like at around 8%, 9%. So financing a vehicle, even though I was only financing $12,000, they end up adding other warranties and all these other things that I really wasn't interested in. But it was kind of like financing 15,000 at the end of the day, but at 9%. And so it didn't make sense for me. So anyways, this is just to be a little helpful on if you're leasing a car and you're being offered an equity payout, look into it. It might be something to consider. And then when prices drop again, you can always get another vehicle. Again, this works if you have an extra car and you really don't need that car that you're driving right now. So I hope that was helpful for you guys. Thanks for watching.